how many of you have actually seen the show? So everybody's seen the show. All right. How did it feel compared to an episode of the series?
I'm familiar with the movie, the first movie, but I thought it captured some of that feel. There's some objects, and there's definitely some parts of it that look familiar to the Stargate universe.
So it didn't feel foreign?
Didn't feel foreign, felt good as far as like the gameplay itself. It was like quick, something I could relate to. It was easy to grasp, even though I didn't know everything about Stargate. It was still a lot of fun.
Okay. Anyone else want to add a comment?
I found it not as human-centric as actually watching episodes of Stargate.
Now, is that a positive for you, or is that a detractor for you?
No, it's positive. It's interesting to have a new way of getting people who aren't from Earth to actually be part of the program, because it's something that's kind of assumed, but it's not something that was ever shown too much in the shows, because we were always following SG-1.
Okay. What specifically of it was less human? Is it just that it was more alien races? Was it more alien situation?
Well, in this particular party, we had one human who was from you.
I was from a different
Earth, but you were not from Earth. Nope. I'm.
Which is technically your name.
Yeah.
Oh, okay, so like as in a Tolan or a right. So just human but unearthly.
And I was Nox.
Yes. Oh, you were actually a Nox or an Eterin?
Eterin.
Okay, yeah, it's kind of like a Nox species, a species that the Eterin revere the Nox. Yeah, they're pointed ears. A Nox off. I like it. All right.
And
Now,
we had an Unas and a Jafar.
okay. Are all you familiar with tabletop role-playing games?
Yes, indeed.
Okay. How did this compare to others that you've played? Is it by the numbers, or is there something special about this that Stargate unlocked?
Convince? Or
Yes,
pursuit?
yeah, the Convince one was different, as well as the detail in the Pursuit, although having played Men in Black, I actually like, oh, I recognize all that, so.
So for people foreign with the nomenclature, the mechanics were slightly different? Okay. All right.
Compared to like just a standard D&D 5e game, the fact that the role-playing scenarios are actually like called out with specific separate rules for role-playing is interesting. It reminds me of another system I play, the Age system, where there's specific role-playing encounters, and it helps people that maybe don't normally get into role-playing actually role-play instead of just like, all right, let's piss this guy off so we get in a fight.
So would you say that this game would be leaning towards greater accessibility to people like myself who don't have a ton of experience with tabletop role-playing games?
The nice thing is,
It's still D&D 5e rules, so it's definitely easier than like say Pathfinder to pick up, but it's harder than some of the completely role-playing focused systems like Fantasy Flights, for example.
Right.
Though you always have to tell people how to read the dice in Fantasy Flight games.
So there is always going to be a little bit of a learning
There's always
curve.
a learning curve.
You were about to say?
Just that one of the nice things about the social interaction rules is it allows you to either say, I try and persuade this person, or I try and trick this person, or you can actually just role play it out if that's what you're more comfortable with. It rewards both styles of play, which I liked.
And you've always been able to do that, of course, but it's usually like if I'm like in a tavern with my rogue in D&D, and I want to try to like deceive somebody into giving us the location to wherever we're going. It comes down to a deception check and you're done. But with the actual progression toward like we use the not resolve points. I'm back to Starfinder. Determination points to try to like track how far we made along that. I like that system. Just calling it out.
Right, and then you use instead of who gets initiative, you use Moxie in order to see who goes first. Because in typical D&D, it's more of everyone just kind of like,
Combat, right.
And what Moxie really allows is that someone can't just hog the spotlight the whole time with the whole encounter. Everyone, for the most part, gets a turn in order to convince the character on what to do.
Which helps the GM, because that's a good GM thing to do, is to make sure, just like if you're in a role-playing encounter and you go around the table and say, okay, what are you doing, blah, 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 or like, do you have an idea? It actually says, No, we're gonna make sure that everybody gets a turn, and that can be hard sometimes when you don't have that codified in the rules.
So in most of the D&D gaming that I have done, combat is much more like tends to be front and center, whereas with Stargate there's a heavy diplomatic element to it. It's not like the only option, just like combat is not the only option. Did you see that reflected in the game mechanics here?
In this one, no. I don't think we necessarily got ourselves into an opportunity that would have let us use diplomacy. We had some dice issues.
Is that indicative of the game or just this particular setting?
It was just some really bad luck rolls in a couple of situations. Tripping on the way out of the camp, for example. I mean, it's just, it's
With the Beretta misfiring off and alerting all the Jaffa guards.
Last dad joke, and it triggered a chase.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
So there was some excitement.
So exactly, we had to go on this chase here, which that dynamic, I love that.
Yeah, the
the pursuit.
pursuit encounter.
Yeah. So we're being chased, and basically there's, the bad guys are coming at us, and we're trying to get away from them, and it gave another dimension to it than having it just, played out from section to section to section as far as like a map is concerned. We could actually use a little bit of theater of the mind to see that happen.
Well, and the other thing I like about that is that the way that you handled it here is very quick and fluid. Whereas, like if it would have just become a combat encounter where there's a map and you got to get from one side of the map to the other, then it becomes, well, what's my move speed and all this stuff.
It could be 5 hours later.
It could be 5 hours later that you finally escape.
How much of this hinges on the quality of the game master or the gate master in our context, do you think? In terms of how your experience is going to come out of the oven?
Hinges on that. So it hinges on the story that is presented, that whether the game master can has something to work with, and then how much the game master can fill in. There's nothing inherently different about this that helps the game master be more able to deal with the impossible, the crazy things that come up that players do. So we had a really great GM.
That's my last question. How did Michael do? Okay.
Great, yeah, he was excellent DM.
Yeah, this is my first time ever GMing.
Really?
Yeah.
No way.
He was like, "Do you think
I've ran it with like a friend or two. Like we
Oh,
kind of
okay.
like quickly, but with two
But like
people,
this.
it's not like open with like six people. This is completely different. You guys were great. You really knew the rules very well, and that helped out. And you guys were awesome role players. It's that whole dynamic that really makes a group great. It's not just the GM; it's like the players as well.
It's a collaborative story.
Yeah.
It always has to be a collaborative story, and that's what
Absolutely.
makes
You guys
games
were
like this
great
a lot of fun.
storytellers.
Yeah.
I think that's nice with this particular, as opposed to some science fiction in created world, is that there are 10 seasons, several movies that people can look at and say, yeah, you can do those same kind of adventures. You can take any of the episodes and turn it into an adventure, and people can kind of recognize it. Mm-hmm. And that helps the game master be able to create things that are interesting.
There's so much you can draw from when there's an established world.
At this point, 6 seasons of continuity before this episode begins. So, final question for people who have not played tabletop role-playing before, but Stargate fans who are going to watch this on Dial the Gate, do you recommend picking it up?
Oh, I totally recommend picking this up. I probably will at this con as well, just to play it. And it's such a good system. I think that it scratches that itch for science fiction. If you're tired of playing fantasy, this is kind of you get the same feel out of it.
Yeah, they did a good job converting the fantasy to more sci-fi from Dungeons and Dragons. I thought they did a very, very good job, like effortlessly. Like it doesn't seem like one for one. Like, oh, instead of a bow, it's this. It's really good.
How do you think the game went? Just how does it feel?
I think the game went really well. The players were very confident. They were very engaging. They definitely wanted to be part of the story. There was one or two that I had to pull more to try to get into it, and that's where I feel like with the Moxie rolls, with the convince encounters, really helped pull them in, because they don't have a choice. They have to be part of the role-playing part of that, and I think that's great, and I think it went really, really well.
what episode did you run, and what was the idea of this story for those of us who are Stargate fans? And
So this is episode 1, groundbreaking, and you are new recruits at Stargate Phoenix.
so this takes place at the Phoenix site
Yeah,
originally,
at the
doesn't
Phoenix
it?
site, yes, it does. You're recruits, and you go through practice, paintball mission basically, and then after that, you're debriefed about going off site. Then suddenly, something happens, and then you're forced off site, and then you have to basically, work your way to get back home.
Okay. You said paintball mission. Did you by any chance use INTARs?
Yes, we
You used, yes! It's like
Yes.
the equivalent,
So
the
one
Stargate
shot
equivalent
is
is
fun.
INTARs.
Right. Yeah. So it was basically one shot, you're hit, then 2 you're stunned.
Right.
Or and 2 you're out, and then 3 you're fully stunned.
They
You're
all suck.
incapacitated. Yes. Yep. In Stargate when they found the fake Stargate, Jaffa teams, skirmishing
Right.
amongst each other against, the other, Jaffa, and they were using the
Apophis
INTAR
was
Yep.
creating Russian American camps, basically.
Yes, to infiltrate.
Yes.
Yeah, Stargate Command.
Season
with
3.
them. Yeah, it was. I love Stargate.
So the references are there for people who love the mythology and want to just jump right in, and there's enough content here to pull that off.
There is definitely enough content, and I'm really excited to do more episodes.
Michael, thank you.
Oh, yeah, it's a
Appreciate
pleasure
you,
meeting
man.
you.
Pleasure.
Thank you for watching this clip from Dial the Gate. If you enjoyed the video, please consider giving us a thumbs up with that like button. It will encourage the algorithm to show this to other Stargate fans. Also, please consider sending this to a fellow Stargate friend. I also want to invite you to subscribe to future episodes right here on YouTube. We are a live show, so changes are likely to happen all the time. And if you plan on joining us live, you'll want to be the first to know. Be sure to visit dialthegate.com for the complete guest schedule so you'll know when to join us and ask your very own questions to our guests. See you on the other side.